So here we are with Andrew. Tell us a bit about yourself, company, and your shop.
Sure. My name's Andrew Murray Watson. I opened a shop in Brixton Village in South London called Guzzl nearly 5 years ago now. I think it's 5 years. It might even be 6. I can't remember. But basically, I was doing some freelance work at the time. No background at all in the food and beverage or retail sectors. I started up originally as a monthly subscription box, and almost as a sort of antithesis to the kind of the Hello Freshes and the wonderfully healthy boxes that make your life easier that come through the door. This was unashamedly full of fattening, yummy treats, full of cream and sugar, basically. And I was going to run it for my spare room, and I thought that's a low cost model, and that's easy. And then I quickly sort of, when you do that, you're slightly disappointed and surprised that everyone you've ever met in your entire life don't immediately sign up for it. And secondly, far from being a low-cost model, the cost of customer acquisition for like an online business like that was extortionate, and I didn't have £1 million of investment sitting in my bank account. So the short version of the long story is that I got a dog, and he became best friends with a Boston Terrier whose owner also had a shop in Brixton, and we became friends, and he lent me his retail advice, and we ended up opening a shop called Guzzl to sort of replace the subscription business, and I got the keys to the unit, and blithely said, "Okay, we'll open in 2 weeks." To which my experienced retail colleague said, "Not on your Nelly, you'll never open in 2 weeks, let alone 2 months." And we opened in 2 weeks, and the first customer walked in, and we still had unpacking stock in boxes on the floor, which was great. And that was I think, that was in November. So, and the shop is basically it's not completely a deli, and it's not sort of it's kind of a gourmet grocery stroke deli, but we don't have a sort of a big cheese or charcuterie counter because we live next door to a cheese shop. So it's a place of indulgent treats, essentially, as the name kind of gives away. So it's full of confectionery and fermented foods and a bit of charcuterie and teas and coffees and pickles and relishes and jams and sauces, and as well as kind of some non-food stuff, kitchenware, tableware, and kind of eclectic mix of things, really.
Excellent. Without getting too far off track, I remember we helped you stock up fairly early on, didn't we?
You did. You did. And I don't know how we first met. Do you remember how we first met? I can't remember exactly.
I think it was through the Biltong people.
It sounds about right.
Yeah. they had some stock, or there was some stock, but yeah. It was, but yeah, we rushed some stock in there for you. Brilliant. Well, look, let's get started. So, good food is
not packed full of ultra processed ingredients. It is generally has good provenance. It is made by people who care, and it tastes great. That is, I should have probably said that first. It tastes great, yeah, that's the prerequisite. It doesn't have to be gluten-free or vegan or vegetarian or anything else. It just has to taste great.
Nice. You sort of answered it already, but how did you get into the independent food industry?
Yeah, so it was, I mean, food's always been a passion. And having started off that subscription box service, when the opportunity arose within Brixton Village, and I lived in Brixton for a good many years prior to that, and loved the neighbourhood. So it was kind of, the jumping off point was the opportunity to open a shop, and there was a unit available at a really good location. That used to be a chocolate shop. How it survived just doing chocolate, I don't know. Well, it did because it closed. So, but to this day, we still have people walking in saying, "Where's the chocolate shop gone?" And we explain that it hasn't been there for 4 years. And they say, "Well, that's terrible. Why did it close?" And we think, well, the fact that you haven't noticed it's not been there for 4 years gives you a clue. So it's an opportunity to kind of really kind of put down roots in the community in a way, and open a shop and really sort of pursue a passion, really. So, and with
it does have a great community feel that where you are.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And I mean, the people who say, "Oh, Brixton's changed," and it does change, but everywhere else changes as well. But there's still a really diverse mix of different types of businesses, and more kind of traditional or kind of businesses, like lots of good fishmongers and greengrocers and butchers and African goods and all sorts of things. And then there's kind of a smattering of, I guess, newer entrants and sort of slightly more upmarket restaurants and places to eat. and we've been there 5 years, so we're almost local now. Give us another 10 years, we'll be deemed to be local.
Brilliant. So what's a high point and a low point in the shop to date?
I think high points, there's so many. I think getting through the first year and getting through, I mean, just still being there, I think generally is a pretty good high point. I mean, it's a pretty small shop, but you know, we've survived COVID, we survived lockdown. Our numbers keep sort of ticking up in kind of encouraging manner. And the fact we're still there and serving the community, I think is generally the high point. In terms of low points, I mean lockdown was pretty grim, and wondering what's going to happen to the business. But I mean, the flip side of that was, you know, we rapidly pivoted to be an online business, and I spent, I think, the March and April of the first lockdown basically on the bike, cycling everywhere within, I think we specified a 4-mile radius, just on the bike delivering parcels to people. And actually, you know, the business ethos is to always surprise customers, and you know that you want to brighten someone's day in a very small way. And if they go out with something that tastes really great, you can achieve that. So I mean, lockdown and being able to become a sort of a yummy emergency service to the door, if you like, was kind of nice. Can you get to talk to people, and perhaps those people hadn't spoken to anyone face to face for 2 or 3 days, and they had something nice for dinner as well. So that, I mean, that was kind of, again, you know, there were 2 extremes, right, in that period. I mean, the low of not knowing what was going to happen to the business, and whether the high street's ever going to open up again. But then, you know, the flip side being, well, actually, you can, you know, you suddenly became able to offer a very valuable service to your customers, which is great.
I love that, surprise customers. I think that's a really nice culture to have in the shop. You know, what we got to surprise, because so often food shopping is repeat, you know, repurchase, repeat, repurchase, repeat, you know, the same category, same product, you know, whereas surprise is that, and that's all I've tried to do with the food club is, you know, is find brands that shops can have that's not hopefully in their competitors' shops for a while anyway.
Yeah.
What one action have you implemented that's created a positive result in the business?
We've recently moved much more into wine than we have done in the past, and we had a shelf behind the counter of sort of super premium spirits, and a couple of bottles of wine just to show willing. And then the neighborhood wine shop, the only decent wine shop in Brixton, closed, and we sort of took the plunge and rejigged a good portion of the shop to sell wine, and we sell about 25-30 SKUs now, and that's probably now, it's almost up to 20% of our business now, which is really encouraging, and obviously increases the average basket price for a customer coming through the door as well. And I'm very fortunate in having a manager who knows the wine industry very well and knows all the wholesalers very well, which has made life a lot easier. And we've basically decided we're going to focus on sort of lo-fi, biodynamic, vegan, organic where we can, wines, as well as having sort of a few staples. So, but that's worked really well. And actually, over the summer, the 3 best-selling wines are all orange wines.
Okay.
And the cheapest one was £18, and the most expensive one was £27, and they outsold everything. So, you know, I don't profess to understand why orange wine is so particularly popular, but it clearly is. So we'll roll with it.
And it's got a high consumption rate as well. You know, I mean, people are, you know, they're buying a bottle of wine. You know, it's a regular purchase. You know, as opposed to other products that have got a much lower consumption rate. It's also interesting in Ireland and America to a certain degree, consumption rate is really focused on in food production, as in customers using the product, where it's not ever discussed in the UK. It always fascinates me that nobody talks about consumption rates.
No, well, no, indeed.
Whereas it's quite an important factor in Ireland. So I've spoke to people in Ireland, and they're like, "Yeah, but we all talk about it. You know, how long does it take a consumer to actually use our product? You know, as a factor when setting up. You know, but fascinating. Which one thing in the independent food industry would you change if you had a magic wand?
cost of raw materials, probably. I
Right.
mean that, you know, I don't think the kind of the inflationary pressures have kind of washed through the system yet, by any means. I mean, and everyone's still struggling from the price of glass and the price of cardboard and the cost of distribution, much more so than they perhaps were a couple of years ago. So if I had a magic wand, I could return those to normal levels. That would be great. I mean, I think in terms of how the industry is structured, you know, I always wonder about the inefficiencies and the I guess the inertia of very large wholesalers and distributors, who even within the independent food space dominate the market in a way that is probably unhelpful and probably is a barrier and obstacle to startup brands, particularly. You know, I wish there was a sort of a more, well, perhaps you are that way, Marcus, but you know, but I think it would certainly the consumer and the independent food sector would both benefit from, I think, a reduction in the kind of the influence of the major wholesalers, certainly.
That's all I've ever. Sorry, very kind, but that is what you couldn't have teed up a ball better for me than that one. But yeah, that's very much what I've tried to do. Is, you know, the stepping stone between launching a food brand and getting listed with a wholesaler. You know, and I encourage food producers, you know, to look at the food club as a stepping stone, because otherwise you've got to do an awful lot of work on your own, and it just gets the momentum going. Get into a few shops. Setting up with the drop shipping model means that they can hopefully supply direct themselves, build themselves up to 30 or 40 shops, and then go and knock on a wholesaler's door with some sales data.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because most of them turn up and go, look, I've got this fantastic product, and they're like, yeah, that's great. But you know, you need to turn up, I've got a fantastic product and it's selling in 40 shops. Well, okay.
Well, that helps. Yeah, I mean, look, because if you go to and you know, I've a, as you know, I have a gin brand as well, and we have to work with all the major wholesalers, the drink specialists, particularly, as well as the likes of, you know, the kind of grocery wholesalers. We don't do very much through them, but for the drinks wholesalers, they, you know, it's even harder because you have to get your product into, say, 20 or 30 bars and restaurants to start with, and then the order from that particular wholesaler, and then go to the wholesaler and persuade them to list you on that basis, or persuade those restaurants to tell the wholesaler to list you on that basis. And then they take 25%, and they don't do anything to promote your products. They're just a dumb supermarket in the sky, and it's incredibly frustrating sometimes.
No, I've heard. I mean, you know, the big catering wholesalers, you've got to go out and get a customer, and then take your product to them and say this customer wants to buy it.
I mean, which other sector in the entire world operates on that basis? It's literally you know, they get paid their cut regardless of if they do anything or not, and that just seems to me absolute madness.
But there are so many things in the food industry that don't happen in other industries.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go into them, but you know, there are so many things that are just very strange in the food industry, and people try to copy things that happen outside the food industry, and they don't work inside the food industry.
No,
but maybe that's for another day.
Yeah.
So what's the most favorite product?
Oh, too many to mention. It really is too many to mention. I mean, I'm a big fan of Mont 58 coffee, which comes from South London. I used to have a bag of that kicking around the house. Too many things to mention. I mean, look, I mean, Davenport chocolate is very good. We sell a lot of that. Those liquid herbs brand that you sell, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head.
It's liquid herbs.
It's just called liquid herbs. I mean, great, because and I've got them all in my fridge because they do taste better than dried herbs out of the drawer, undoubtedly. But also from a retailer perspective, they're tiny. I can sell 6 or 7 SKUs on a space about the size of a shoebox, right? I mean, it's like you know, it earns its space.
And they're also ambient. You don't need to keep them in the fridge. They're ambient in and out after opening as well.
Absolutely. And you know, with energy prices as they are, I would just say to any independent producers watching this, ambient is great. If you can produce a product that's ambient, that replace the product that would otherwise go in the fridge, you're going to win. You're just going to win.
You see, that's the thing, that you see an ambient product, the shop makes 35-40% on the shelf. And when I'm working with chilled products, I'm saying to them, but hang on a sec, it's 35 to 40% possibly in the fridge, but you're also deducting energy costs the longer it's in the fridge. So if you've got what I call a longer life chilled product, it's not a great advert. It's got to be high selling ambient, high selling chilled. Otherwise, the energy costs start chewing into the margin.
Completely. The fact that it is ambient to start with probably implies a shorter lifespan anyway, so you're going to have more wastage as a result. But ambient is great. We love ambient.
And guilty food pleasure or naughty food secret?
I really love corned beef, right? And I mean, not like posh artisan corned beef. I mean the stuff that comes in the weird shaped tins with a little key that always breaks halfway around, right? That corned beef with lots of HP sauce.
Love it.
But obviously I appreciate incredibly well made products made with a passion and great and so on and so forth as well. But if you're talking about guilty secret pleasure,
really, that's cool. Do you know what? It's a bit like the Guinness advert. What was the Guinness advert? I've never tasted Guinness because I don't like the taste. And it's a bit like that. I've never tried corned beef because I don't think I'd like the taste. But I was just thinking, I don't like it, but I don't like it even though I've never tried it. That's really interesting. I might have to pick up a tin just to see.
If someone wants to, come out and create an artisan corned beef that costs £6 or £7 a tin, it would do really well. At least
there's one from Ireland that won. It was I can't remember the butcher's name now, but it won Grand Supreme Champion in the Great Taste Awards about 10 years ago. It was a corned beef, but it was made by a butcher in Ireland. And it was the champion. Just so, what was it about the food club that you like, works, or has helped the business?
I mean, you've got a great range of products. Number one, I think when I started the shop and obviously subsequently, it's just great to be able to pick up the phone and speak to you. You know your products, the sort of what market is doing, and you're a big advocate for the things that you sell. Amongst the kind of the drop ship and the wholesaler fraternity, you're pretty unique in that regard, I think. So, and we obviously we do use other wholesalers, but I'd much rather use artisan at all. But whenever I can, the buying interface is great, and you're generally around it when something goes wrong, which is also useful.
I was going to say I always say to food producers, I go, well, to me, it's when things need fixing. That's when you need to be there. Everybody can take an order, everyone can deliver an order, everyone can make a product, but it's when there's a break in the middle, that's when you need to step up. And I say to so many food producers, I go, if you've got a customer with a problem, you name one job in your company at that moment that's more important. And they can't, yet they still don't prioritize customer problems. And to me, a customer problem is a great opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely right. And, we all suffer from DHL dropping a case of jars on your foot, whatever it is. So, I mean, there has to be that sort of capability there. So, yeah, absolutely. And I think, the biggest sort of recommendation I could sort of provide was whenever I deal with kind of very local independent food producers that I have a product in the shop or they come in looking for advice, so I meet them, whatever, I say, speak to Marcus, just give Marcus a call, and he will give you invaluable advice for free.
But I always find, I was saying this funnily enough to a lady yesterday from Ireland, that so many food producers are close. They've got everything in place. There's just little changes that need making. Case size, credit terms, delivery. They're very little changes. By the time you've got a product sort of ready to go, but if you don't make those little changes, some people make out that it's huge changes you need and charge accordingly, which I'm not going into. But most often than not, it's small changes. And it just makes a massive difference.
And it's often it's just naivety on the part of startups that you know, rather than anything else that prevents them from capitalizing on their potential. I mean, I had one very interesting looking hot sauce company the other day who were not completely distant to the shop, and we emailed them and said, hey, can you drop in a sample of products that look really interesting? To which the response was, we're a very small business, it's not financially viable for us to send you out a sample. To which my response was, okay, that's fine, it's not going to be viable for us to stock you then. So, you know,
yes.
And I think it's so everyone needs a, you know, someone to tap them on the shoulder and say, look.
But you don't know what you don't know. But
Well,
at
exactly.
the same time, people do have preconceived ideas and things from their entire life, you know, and it not necessarily carries through.
Yeah.
And I've helped a lot of food producers rethink the way that they just structure their business. And most of it's in the mind. You know, if you can get your head in the game, for want of a better word, and think like a shopkeeper. And this is all I say to food producers: stop thinking like a food producer and start thinking like, you know, if you understand the shopkeeper, then it's very easy to supply the shopkeeper with what they need. But if you're asking the shopkeeper to bend to your way of it, it doesn't work.
No, it's only goes harder. And I always say to people when I meet them at shows and stuff, you know, think about the shape of your jar or your bottle, right? Don't have those ridiculously wide bottles for your sauce that are going to take. I have to knock out 2 SKUs to put it in, right? I mean, it's stuff like that you only ever think about as a retailer, right? Because you just otherwise it would just be thought would never occur.
No, fascinating. Right. Well, I think the expression is gamekeeper turned poacher. But tell us about Brixton Gin.
So Brixton Gin, we launched it in November 2020, having conceived it in March 2020 when we just had a baby and we were drinking someone else's gin in the back garden, which was quite a common occurrence after having our first baby. And I'd sort of been kicking around this idea that it was of starting at Brixton Gin on the basis that Brixton is an international food and drink hub that is recognised as such across the world, certainly in English-speaking markets. And it just seemed crazy that it didn't have its own gin. And whenever I mentioned this to people, they said, "What do you mean Brixton doesn't have its own gin?" Of course it has its own gin. I said, "No, it doesn't." So there's a lot of serendipity on the way. We found a guy, Abby Bannock, who's one of the foremost distillers in the country, who we briefed, and he created our recipe for us. It is I guess, a contemporary twist on your classic London dry. It is a dry gin, but we've added some hibiscus, some violet, a little bit of raw Brixton bees honey from a local beekeeping family. Just to kind of elevate it and give it a bit of distinction in a market dominated by, you know, 1,000 very good London dries that you would struggle the next morning to identify, given their similarity to each other. So that was a kind of driving ethos. So we created a product that has a very standout brand that looks great on your shelf, which I think has a pretty unique taste in the market without being too challenging, and which has, you know, great links back to its community. We work with an organisation called Urban Growth. They take disused urban spaces and turn them into gardens, and they're growing some of our botanicals in Brixton. We have a few juniper trees growing in a little orchard behind St Matthew's Church in Brixton. They're probably the only commercial juniper trees in London, but I'm not sure what crop we'll ever get out of them. But nevertheless, so we are very much focusing on off-trade, probably more than on-trade now. We've just launched, in addition to our 70cl bottle, we've now got a 70cl refill pouch, which is 100% recyclable. You literally, when it's empty, you drop it in the post. No stamp, no envelope, just drop it in the post, and it gets returned for recycling. We also have a 5-litre bag-in-box, so it looks like a wine box with a little tap at the bottom. You put it on your shelf, and that offers a kind of a refill solution for retailers, customers as well. And that is significantly cheaper than buying by the bottle. So if the retail price for a bottle is going to be about £38-39, a retailer can make, you know, 40% margin selling, you know, out of the refill box at about 30, £3 equivalent. So
Okay.
it's a great margin play as well as being a kind of great sustainability play as well.
I don't drink, and I haven't tasted it obviously, but I think the packaging is fantastic. That's
Thank you.
I just think the color, the red, it just catches your eye, and it's obviously a gin, but I mean 90% of the first sale is catching somebody's attention.
Well, this is it, and this is what my partner and I had no background in the drinks industry, but we just wanted to create a visual brand that stood out, right? So that's what we tried to do. We were not governed by any sort of industry conventional thinking on the subject, which is probably a good thing in the long run. And just to say as well that, I mean, obviously we have Brixton Gin listed with you. From a retailer perspective, we will supply a kind of a measuring beaker and a kind of funnel and everything as well that goes with the refill box as well. So if you're looking at kind of refill, a sustainable solution for gin, it should be a winner.
Fantastic. Andrew, thank you so much for your time.
No problem.
Fascinating talking. Great to catch up. Haven't seen you in ages.
I know.
So brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Cheers.
You're very welcome. Thanks very much.